Today, we're going to be looking at the Aura Ultimate EA by Mr. Stanislav Tomilov. So, Mr. Stanislav is one of the most famous developers in the MQL5 marketplace, and he comes out with Aura bots relatively frequently. Many of them in the past have been blatant history readers or effectively scams. However, this one looks a bit different. It doesn't look to be a history reader, it appears to just be a higher risk gold bot. So going through the actual description here, he likes to lean heavily on AI, because frankly I think it sells to claim that you're using AI. What he's saying here is that it's using neural nets and adaptive intelligence and a whole bunch of fancy jargon sounding terms, but I'm not so sure if it's actually using any of this. Because guys, you have to think a bit critically occasionally, right? If it says tri-layer neural logic, and what does that actually mean, right? It's just big words, but how is he actually applying it? And clearly what we can see here is that there's not a tremendous amount of detail regarding how he's actually applying some of the techniques he says he is. It's also saying strategy engine, okay, self-optimization, cool, maybe he's hard-coded a neural net, but we don't really know. So frankly, I never like it when developers tend to kind of jargon drop, because if you can't explain it as you would to a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, there's probably something unnecessarily complex behind it. So overall, yeah, it looks to be very AI kind of emphasized at the moment. We can see is that apparently it's trading gold, and it's not super duper spread sensitive because it works with any broker. And one thing what I'm seeing here is that apparently there's no grid trading and no averaging, and that you're able to have a stop loss and a take profit with each trade. But what I'm seeing, which is kind of interesting, is that there does appear to be a recovery mechanism in it. So the actual thing we're getting from the sales page here is that quite clearly it is a gold trading EA. He's claiming to use neural networks, but I don't really see anything with neural networks actually going on. And apparently there's no grid martingale. When it comes to no grid martingale, I actually would be inclined to believe him just by looking at some of the signals. So as we can see here, these dips are characteristic of recovery trades, because what it's doing is that after there's a big loss, it rapidly jumps back up. And what this generally means is that there's some degree of lot scaling going on. So if we go here, for instance, over to our lot scaling, we can see that, over to our, let me move my head, there we go, over to our signal page, we can see that as soon as there's a loss, the next one is immediately a tripling of the actual lot size. So here too, this is kind of what we were seeing. We go from 1.6 and then there's a tripling on the next one, and we go to 2. The main downside with this is that ultimately, if we have more than 2 losses in a row, we can unfortunately blow it. So here we can see is that he did run it initially. There we go. So this one is a good example of when he ran it initially and there were multiple losses in a row, and that was fine because it was when he was still starting very slow. So you can see that for instance, we did have a scaling, but at the same time recently when he's increased the lot size, that has not been great. And he has not been actually trading, he has not taken any major runs of losses since he's increased the lot size. So when it was really small, it worked because he could increase it many times without blowing the account. But as of late, since he's been using a bit more money or big boy money in it, we have not been seeing that same behavior. So what that shows to me is he probably did run a few different signals and he picked one that actually recovered. So that is not a phenomenal sign. We can see here is that, those little kind of problems happened a bit earlier, but since then we've largely been good. So this is a gold system with recovery. So it's actually a real trading strategy, which is kind of refreshing from this guy, because to date most of them have been pretty sketchy. I am seeing just I ran a backtest here, by the way. I downloaded it and I ran a backtest, and what we can see is that it appears to be more or less like a breakout system. We can see it's kind of placing trades at prior highs and lows. So boom, we break out there, break out here, and it does seem to have a nice mix of shorts and longs. So it's not kind of sketchy. Let me just move my head here. It's not sketchy from the fact that he's trying to only hold positions forever and never actually use a stop loss. So that's also looking pretty good to me. But really the main thing to be careful with here is that there is a pretty aggressive recovery mechanism where essentially after a loss he's coming in and massively scaling. What we can see here is that I ran a back test using every ticks based on real ticks for a year and returning $10,000 to $270,000. This is very much just overfitting based on trade order. So most likely what would happen is if he did not manipulate it, he could have optimized it in such a way where that you never really had 2 or 3 losers in a row. And in doing so, you didn't actually blow your trading account. Whereas had you done this in a Monte Carlo simulation where you kind of permute the order of the trades, you could very well have blown up, because unfortunately, if you kind of permute the order and you suddenly have a string of losers, you can have a bot that just goes boom. So you have to be really, really careful about that. So it does appear to actually be a real strategy though, which is kind of interesting. Now let's go here and look at some of the inputs. Apparently you can turn recovery on or off. So let's try turning recovery off and see what happens. And there's 2 strategies, strategy 1 and strategy 2. So I wouldn't be surprised if one is actually a meaner version and the other one is more of a kind of breakout style system, just given the trades I'm seeing. And let's see what happens if we actually run it like that. Okay, now this is actually worse because now I turned, actually no, it's taking some losses, that's good. So this is meant to be recovery turned off, but now we're seeing an equity curve which looks too good to be true. Because yes, it is taking the occasional loss, but it's still going up beautifully. Yeah, okay. So this is just heavy over optimization. So yes, there's the option to turn recovery on and off, but the issue is we're not able to accurately test how the strategy will actually look because he's just massively overfitted. What we're seeing as well too is, yeah, it's just he's using an enormous stop loss, so you don't hit it that often. So he's using an enormous stop loss because that's why we're seeing a 94% win rate with a super inverted risk reward. Once again, to move my head, super high win rate, enormous risk reward, or enormously inverted risk reward. And what that is meaning is that he's not losing often. So effectively what he's doing is he's probably gone through in his back test and took out the losing trades. So guys, there is a real strategy here actually. It looks to be a pretty straightforward breakout trigger with an aggressive recovery function that scales after losses. The big no bueno there is if you have recovery turned on, you might not know what it's doing and you could have 4, 5, 6 losers in a row and all of a sudden you completely blow through your trading account. So you have to be very mindful of that. Once again, all the neural network stuff just looks like marketing fluff. There's nothing real behind it. I wouldn't necessarily put too much weight on that. And the actual back tests also look to be heavily manipulated just because you wouldn't see this level of like 10 grand to 166 grand. The edge there is just so high that there's probably some degree of overfitting. So once again, I wouldn't necessarily buy this bot just because this guy does not have a great reputation. At the same time, this is actually a lot better than some of his previous ones because there is a real strategy here. It's just a very aggressive form of scaling, and that can be quite dangerous. Just be careful. So guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.